So I'm 23 years old and I've just completed my second year of working. I'm actually at the beginning of my third one. And just for some context, I'm doing the chartered accountant stream. So I studied for 4 years. You do 3 years of a bachelor's, 1 year honors, and then you do a period called articles, which is basically like your practical period. In a similar way that doctors have a period after they finish studying where they're learning on the job. It's basically the accounting equivalent of that. And man, what a ride it's been so far. I'm just starting my third year. This is my final year, but my second year, which would be last year, was absolutely awful. Like the worst that I could have ever imagined. Just a complete just concoction of stress, descending into absolute like just nothingness, just almost nihilistic in a way. But I guess knowing that it's gonna end gave some kind of hope. But it was just absolutely terrible, and I've just spent a lot of time reflecting. I've just come back from about 3 weeks of leave. 3 weeks I've been looking forward to the whole year. And I've had a lot of time to just reflect. Alongside the reflection and introspection, I would have been doing a lot during last year. But yeah, there's just so many things, man, I've taken away from what I went through last year. The worst year of my life. No contest about it. And man, I think going through such a difficult period makes you reflect a lot. It makes you question yourself a lot. It makes you question God a lot. And it really tests, when you think of 1 Peter 1 verse 7, where it speaks about, your test being put through the fire. That's what I felt. I feel like I went through last year. And not to say it's over by any means, but whatever's to come, I'm expecting it to be just a little bit different. But nonetheless, yeah, here's my reflections from last year. I think the first thing that I'd like to point out is that you learn, obviously, in your suffering, you learn a lot about just the struggles you face through suffering, and it really puts things into perspective. The first thing that I want to speak about is just the concept of suffering and what that actually means, and learning how we can deal with it as humans. I've just finished listening to Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning audiobook, and I'm not comparing what I went through to what he went through in Auschwitz at all, but it's a similar thing where it's like you go through suffering, it really makes you start asking a bunch of questions, life questions, because to put you in my shoes and kind of what I felt like I was going through last year, it was like waking up every day just crying because I don't want to go to work, and it felt a lot like I was going back out to war. And it's very interesting just learning from a neuropsychological point of view. Your brain actually thinks you're at war. Like it thinks like a morning that I'd have where I just don't want to go to work, and these were a lot of mornings last year where alarm goes off and I'm like, cool, let me get up, let me go spend some time in my devotionals, let me go out and get some exercise in, and then get ready, get started on the day. A lot of the times I'm like, I want to get an early start on the day just so I can, put out the fires that might come out during the day. I'd find myself staying in bed not only as long as possible, but longer than I should, and end up being late for work. And something I found, I was listening to a podcast, and they described this phenomenon as kind of just your brain actually sees, like when you're overstressed, or when you're in a period of just prolonged stress, your brain actually sees going out into the world as there's a bear out there, like it's gonna kill you. Like it makes it seem as if you're gonna die, and it forces you to stay in. And I never understood it, because I'm like, I want to get up, I want to get out of bed, I want to go and start getting ahead, because there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done, but I can't get myself out. Like I'm fighting against my own brain, and my brain is winning, because you can't win against your own brain, right? I'm like, I want to get out of bed, but I'm just not doing it. And that really put a lot of things into perspective. And something else that would kind of just tie into this concept, I saw this Instagram post a few days ago from this guy who he was just reflecting on his 26th birthday, and he said, worst year of his life. And there was a particular slide where he mentioned how he'd spend 40 minutes just sitting in his car, because and the reason he did that was because getting out of the car felt like setting life in motion again, and just sitting in there just felt like you have a pause. And I feel like that's exactly what it was like for me. Like a lot of last year was just, I was just getting up trying to survive the day. It really felt like, I mean, talk about getting taken through the valley of the shadow of death. Like I genuinely felt, I'm like, I don't want to get up and go to work today. I don't want to get up today. I just want to run from my problems. And it was facing a lot of that. And you start asking a lot of questions. You ask a lot of questions about suffering, because it's like every day feels like you are in that fire. It feels like man, like get me out of this, God, please help me. I can't be here any longer. Get me out. Anything to get out. It's like you look for any way of escape, and in that you really start thinking like, how can I stay in there? Because obviously the first thing when you're going through like extensive suffering like that, for me, I got to a point where, and I'm very much at that point now in terms of like mentally, where I'm like, I know I need to like finish this journey, and like there's, I shouldn't just quit now, right? But if I could quit, I would have quit. And again, for some context, it's like, there's a job that I need, it pays for my bills and everything. I don't have the luxury of going back home and staying with my parents and just doing nothing. So it was one of those where it's like, man, I'm actually stuck here. And the first thing you think about is, can I get out of this? How can I like make this stop, right? Because that's all that's going through my head every day. That's all that was going through my head every day. It's like, how do I make this stop? And the first part was, can I like not do this? And like you kind of look around and you're like, man, like I actually don't have an option but to go through this. I don't have an option. You're in the valley of the shadow of death, and you have no option but to like keep going, because there's no way out. So that's the first kind of like, and that hurts, man. That sucks. Where you're like, man, I hate this, but I can't get out of this. That's kind of the first part. And then the second part is now, cool, I am in this. I need to go through. How am I going to make it through? Because I don't feel like I have I can't do this any longer. And not even from a place of like, oh, I want to go commit suicide or anything. That was never on the cards. But it's just like I don't know, like I need an escape from this. I don't know how much longer I can take this kind of thing. And it's like now you start really trying to find ways to figure that out. And that's when you start really digging deep in the concept of suffering. And I remember something that became quite apparent to me when I was struggling a lot last year was I got to a place where I didn't want to speak a lot with a lot of people, because you'd share like kind of what you're going through, and people like, bless their hearts, they want to solve your problems, right? Like they're like, cool, you're in suffering, let me solve your problem. And it's always so interesting how ignorant you can be as human beings. But I guess also it's kind of arrogance. But I think it's just not being in someone else's shoes, right? It's like I'd be telling somebody this, like I'm struggling with all of this, and somebody like they want to whip up some, fix this quickly advice. It's like they want to give you like practical advice, or they want to give you like a Bible verse that's supposed to make everything magically go away, or they think a theology around suffering is wrong. Like they think, oh man, this guy just thought he wasn't going to suffer anything, and it's like, it's none of that, right? But like the part that amuses me is just kind of like, dude, I've been struggling with this all year, say for the last year. You've heard me speak for like 5 minutes, and the first thing that's come to your mind is advice you've given me. You think I haven't thought of that? Like, come on, bro. And it's one of those things, like, it's people like, meanwhile they want to solve your problem, but it's like it's a bit ridiculous. So it's like somebody's sharing something they've been suffering with, like suffering through for the last year, and you get a lot of people who just like, oh, I've had 2 minutes to ponder over this, and I know exactly what you need that'll fix your problem. It's like, oh, how's your alone time with God? How's your devotionals going? It's like, you think I haven't thought of that? You think I haven't been trying that? Like, something that really became apparent to me in this was reading the story of Job. And it was so interesting because I had read the story of Job like very early on last year, and then I got back to reading it again. I think it was like around the midpoint of the year, and I saw it so differently, because the first time I read it, and I kind of just got the gist of it, right? It was like, cool. For the first 2 chapters, Job was just getting the suffering just thrown upon him. It's kind of like, Job chapter 1. Satan's kind of just going around, and then he's like, and God's like, hey, what's up, Satan? And Satan's like, oh, nothing much, just roaming around the world. And then God's like, have you thought about my servant Job? It literally sounds like God is just like, go after Job. Right? But don't take his life. And then, all this stuff happens, like God makes a deal with Satan and all this stuff, and Job is all of a sudden thrust into this, and it's kind of like 36 chapters of like Job and his friends kind of just going back and forth, and the last 2 chapters it's God like absolutely back, like he's like, he's calling out Job. He's like, who is this? who speaks with such arrogance, like, where were you when I made the sun and the moon and the stars? Like, that was kind of the gist of it, right? Like, Job got thrown into suffering, he kind of complained a bit, God called him out, and then he restored everything and said Job was faithful. The second time I read it, I started noticing some things. The first thing I noticed was when Job had everything taken away, like, his kids, his livestock, like, everything around him just kind of fell apart. His response was pretty good. He was like, God has given and God has taken away, blessed be the name of the Lord. And then it was only when his health started getting attacked, when he started going mad. Like, that's when he really started struggling. He started saying some wild things and stuff I was resonating with, right? It was like, cursed is the day I was born. Better is a baby that's stillborn, because they don't have to go through all of this. What does it profit a man to pray to God? How can I appeal to my accuser? Right, speaking about God, again, just all these things. I'm like, whoa. And he started doing that after he got sick. And I started realizing, I'm like, again, Job's theology around suffering wasn't terrible. Like, you saw in Job chapter 1, he had everything taken away and he responded very good, like, very well. But then when he started getting, like, physically attacked, he started going crazy. I'm like, why? And for me, it was easy to see, because I was going through something similar, not exactly the same, but just in a similar vein of, like, the suffering is just a lot, right? And it sucked, it sucked. And his friends are coming to him and they're like, oh, maybe you have some sin in your life, or they're coming up with all this advice, and he's like, no, that's not the case at all. And obviously we know, because we've gotten in Job chapter 1 the context of the whole story. But again, it was just one of those cases of, like, it just sucks. Right, it sucks, and he's lamenting to God, which is one of the lessons in the book as well. But it's like, dude, he's just suffering, and it's just hard. And that was kind of a lot of what I was going through last year, and I just kind of realized a lot of people didn't get that. And there's a certain people that do get that, and those people you obviously want to, like, speak with and stuff. But that was something I noticed. Your theology around suffering starts getting tested quite a bit, and you start reading a lot more into, like, simple stuff, like, take heart, for in this world you'll have troubles, but take heart, for I've overcome the world. It's stuff you'll read and you'll hear and it's like, cool. But when you're going through suffering, you start holding on to that stuff. You start really, like, digging deep into it. I mean, I just finished a devotional on James 1, and it's like dissecting all the stuff. It's like, count it pure joy when you go through suffering, because the suffering produces steadfastness. And it's like that word steadfastness means remaining under pressure, and that word, like, trials, or when you face trials, that part means being surrounded by trials. And it's like, man, that's how I feel surrounded. I feel like I'm constantly under pressure. You start digging deeper into these things and just trying to hold on to anything just to keep you going. And that's one of the good things, but it's also tough as well, because you also start questioning a lot about yourself, because there's ways you respond, like, we don't know how we're going to respond until we're actually in the suffering, right? There's ways you respond, you're like, man, cool. There's some periods where I'm like, I'm praying to God, and that's something I'd say I have done, and not even because I'm a virtuous person or anything like that. Just genuinely, like, God was the only person I could go to, right? I know He was the only one who could save me, so it's like constantly, every single day, just praying and stuff. And then there's periods where I'm like, and this happened to me towards the end of last year, where it's like, I'm just tired, I'm just beat down, and I started using it as an excuse to just start falling back into sin. And it's like, you start learning a lot about it. You start questioning yourself. You're like, man, like, what is wrong with me? Why do I keep doing this? Or, I want to be disciplined. Why am I struggling with this? You really start doing a lot of introspection. And then you also start asking a lot of questions to God. You see, again, as I mentioned earlier, like, Job literally said, what does it profit a man to pray to God? At first I saw that, I was like, I can't believe you said that. But I'm like, same. I feel the same, because I'm like, I'm going through the suffering, I'm praying to God, and God is saying no. I'm looking around, people like they're having a good time. God is blessing them with the things I wish I had, and it just feels like God is just against me. And there's a part again where He says, like, if I have to appeal to my accuser, and he speaks about how if it's a context of wisdom, God wins. If it's a context of strength, who can stand up to God, right? It's one of those things again of like, I am facing an impossible challenge. Like, God is like God Almighty, and He's against me. Like, this is hopeless, right? And that's exactly how I felt a lot of last year. You start asking questions, a lot of questions about God, and it's questions, like, very similarly to what I was saying about dissecting, like, the Bible and all these things around suffering. It's like, there's things like the textbook answer to, but then knowing them here, in your heart, really starts getting tested. Like, that's when it really gets tested, like what you actually believe, right? You start to see what you believe in here when you're getting pressed. right? And that's why, Peter speaks about, your faith being tested, like gold being purified, right? The all those verses, it's that's what's happening. It's like, okay, cool, you know that God is good, you know that He knows what He's doing, you know that He's sovereign, and you know He's a good Father, right? And it's like, cool, let's test that. Let's go through a period where you are suffering like uncontrollably, feels like you're gonna drown. You're praying to God and it feels like He's not really answering you, or it feels like He's not giving you enough. It's like, how are you gonna respond? Like, are you gonna hold on to that truth that God is good? And I'll be honest, for me, I struggled a lot with that last year. And I think there's still a part of me that's recovering, right? I learned about this concept of prayer, right? I learned from Matt Chandler, where we're saying the Bible calls us to pray in full faith that God will answer our prayers, but to hold it with an open hand, that if He says no, we're fine. Like, we're not going to be angry at God or whatever it is, right? And for me, I got the concept of praying with an open, like holding these desires with an open hand, like that got beat into me last year, right? It was like, cool, God does His will, like he can say no. Like, I learned that, I got very accustomed to that. But then in that, I started losing the concept of praying in full faith, because again, like Job said, I felt like, what does it profit a man to pray to God? Because he keeps saying no. And that's something I had to really wrestle with, wrestling with God, like, God, what are you doing? Like, why are you making me go through all of this? And then the other part as well was just the actual theology around work. Like, you start learning a lot of things, right? Like, you start digging like for purpose, you're like looking for anything, man. I felt like a lot of last year I was just getting tossed to and fro in the wind. I had no no solid ground at all. Like, I just felt like I was floating, and you just look for something to anchor you, man. You start looking all these verses, and then it's like, cool, I'm in this job I hate. And I was like, okay, you start thinking about your purpose. And I know what my purpose is, but it's like, cool, right now I don't feel like I'm living in my purpose, and I want out, God. But God is like, no, you gotta finish. It's like, cool, now I gotta reframe this thing of like, okay, I started learning some things like, we're called to minister wherever we are. It's not like, oh, when you finally get into ministry, if you feel like you're called to ministry, and for me, I'm like, I'm called to ministry. It's not like when you finally get into full-time ministry, then you can start, ministering. It's like where God has you, He has you for a reason, and there you're supposed to work hard, right? Those the Colossians 3 verse 23, working as if you're working for the Lord. Again, that's where it gets tested, right? Because it's like, cool, you hate this job with every fiber of your being. You're struggling, you're trying, and it sucks. And you have to keep showing up every day, keep getting beat down, but you have to remember, I'm doing this for God. Like, God is the one who sees me, right? And you have to start learning these things, these concepts about like your character being the highest like standard. God is looking for your character, right? Not your performance. Just things like that. You really start digging deep into all these things, like learning like a right theology around work. And something that's interesting, and I look forward to it as well. I've heard, like, again, going through these things, you start learning things that you're going to use once you're out of that season, right? Like, when I go into my next season and I face different challenges or whatever it is, this is stuff I've got screwed on properly because I had to wrestle with it the whole of last year. Like the attitude you're supposed to have around work, like producing like excellence is something you're supposed to be aiming for, right? You're supposed to be just giving your best even when it sucks. Like, those are the things you're supposed to like learn like properly, right? And it's so interesting just hearing about that, and it really challenges you, challenges your theology, it challenges your identity, it challenges your relationship with God, right? I mean, you kind of see how you view God when you go through suffering, right? Because obviously you're faced with this thing that's like slamming in your face, and the word is telling you something that seems contrary to what you're seeing in your life, and you've got to reconcile those two, right? You've got to be like, hey, maybe my perspective around this is wrong. It's got to be, because the word is perfect. God is never changing, and what the word says about Him is true. So it's got to be the way I'm seeing my reality that's wrong, or seeing how this reality fits in to these concepts that are being that are being preached or taught in the Bible. But yeah, those are some of the reflections I got from last year. I mean, you guys, let me know in the comment section below if there's something you want to say about that. Maybe share your own experience. Make sure you subscribe to join the brotherhood. But until next time,